I'm Steve Zautke, and welcome to another edition of the Traction Reaction Podcast. And it's my honor to bring aboard Tony DiZinno, who's been on the show before when it was in its other iterations. And Tony, welcome aboard.
Thanks, Z-Man. It's like getting back on a bike, but unlike Renus VK or Oliver Askew, I have no injuries with which to disclose on that front. So
we were talking to some people up at a certain resort up in Elkhart Lake, and we were talking about drivers who got injured and whatnot, and bicycling is scary. And it's not necessarily the action of bicycling, but it's everything else.
It is all the other factors that you never know. Road bikes.
Yes, everything.
Yes.
You know, staying at home and doing it on a stationary bike has become so popular because you don't have to worry about getting sideswiped by a car. I remember I was 16 years old. I got a driver's license. I'm never riding a bike again. So 5, 6, 7 years later, I had to use a bike for some reason. I forget. And I ran home to my parents. I had to run up to the store. And I remember it just had rained. I was shocked at these cars zipping past me because you're not used to it again. And it was old hat when you're a kid, but I'm like, holy cow, this is like dangerous.
The funny thing for me is, of course, even though I have Wisconsin roots like most folks, I grew up in Arizona, and I would bike around, my family's house, and you're out on a dirt bike essentially because you're,
Sure.
But it's at least a controlled environment. When you're out on the open roads and you don't know what you're going up against, and throughout 20, 30 years you hear of various collarbone injuries. And it's, as a friend told me, there's you either go over the handlebars and out of championship contention. So that's not great when that happens.
Yeah, unfortunately so. Yeah, I mean, and I think I did it when I was, I think, 14. The worst concussion I had. I mean, I was out of it for like 3 days going over the handlebars when my buddy went left and I went right, and boom, over I went. But yeah, it's scary stuff. But yeah, Peloton, that's why they're making all that money.
Yeah.
It's not only a good workout, but it's a hell of a lot safer too.
It's refreshing to see them bounce back from their PR mess a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Now it's like, okay, the pandemic actually helped them. So good times.
I saw your tweet. I was up in Road America NASCAR weekend, which was just an awesome event. Tip of the hat to Road America. I've been saying to the buildup of this, they were very proactive in how they approached the crowd and how they would bring certain people. They wanted to truck some of the people in. They didn't want 90,000 people there and 35,000 cars on the lot. But I mean, fantastic event. I mean, just everybody was really excited. I said the most important thing about the weekend was you didn't want the size of the crowd and people waiting in cars to get in to be the story. You wanted the race and the crowd to be the story, and they were able to successfully do that, I feel.
I had dinner with a photographer that was shooting for both NASCAR Trans Am clients during the weekend, and he mentioned the same thing, where the level of preparation from the Road America staff, John Everett, and their communications just all on the ground. When you parked on Sunday, you parked in your spot. Usually the beautiful thing about the track is you can drive around, you can take a golf cart wherever you want to go. But there, it's just, get in the spot, navigate the grounds, get in early. I love the early-ish start time. I mean, it's rare to have a, 2-ish, 1:30-ish start time here because they're a big fan of the noon or 11:45. But even so, I was surprised at just how fast the race got done and how good everyone was able to ingress and egress. So big impressiveness. And frankly, it took longer for them to get to victory lane than it did to actually complete the race at the end of it.
I thought, well, maybe I can get away with not knowing who won the race, but I took a quick look at Twitter. I was looking at something else. I saw your tweet basically saying, well, we knew it was bound to happen, but Joseph Newgarden won. Looking into it, when I saw he was on the pole and I was monitoring what was happening in Mid-Ohio, you were like, okay, Team Penske is going to win one of these races. And it was certainly that race at Mid-Ohio, wasn't it?
Stars completely aligned finally, right? I mean, so Detroit, you have a rare dominant race that nothing was done wrong other than just being on the wrong tires at the wrong time. That track is notorious for eating up the red compound tires, and Pato O'Ward bangs wheels. And to me, it almost felt like kind of a changing of the guard in physical virtual mode. real mode because you see a guy that, Joseph was the young guy 8, 9, 10 years ago. Now he's
Right.
30 already. He's in his 10th season, which seems hard to believe. And then obviously at Road America is the gearing issue. He comes up the hill. It's electrical. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I talked to members of the 2 team and they were just gutted. I mean, they had to really put it on, and they wouldn't be denied at Middow. And yet it almost seemed like he was going to be. I was like, oh gosh, what cartoon anvil is going to fall out of the sky? What, is there going to be he's going to hit some gravel that pops out of the keyhole or something. He hits his teammate who's a lap down or something at the wrong time, who, even if he's not in it, I mean, power got taken out, 2, 3 laps into it. So I just, that it had to happen, and it happens on 4th of July, 50th anniversary of the team's first IndyCar win. Most successful American driver now in terms of wins. It had to happen, and I think it single-handedly saved his championship, George.
Yeah, 2 things. Mid Ohio is a Honda track with Honda located nearby. Scott Dixon's domination of Mid Ohio over the last 10 years or so, and then you look at Joseph Newgarden Chevrolet, dominating. I think they led like 73 of the 80 laps, but only 2 Chevrolets in the top 10, with him and Pato O'Ward, which are basically the 2 top Chevys to begin with. Marcus Ericsson with a nice run with Ganassi, a Ganassi sweep basically of 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Rossi looking good again, just a little bit off. He's close to putting it all together. And then Rahal Letterman Racing, Lanigan Racing with Rahal, the return once again of Santino Ferrucci and Sato, all in the top 10.
That Rahal team, very under the radar, and they, because none of them were in the top 5, right? I mean, you've got Ganassi's firing all Honda's strength right now, even though Chevrolet's strength is better, where they didn't used to have a 2nd or occasionally 3rd team in the mix, but they have had Arrow, McLaren, SP, and Ed Carpenter Racing pick up the slack. Whereas the Honda depth, it's like Dixon finished 3rd among Ganassi drivers at Mid Ohio. It's like what does that do? Rossi, it's like he's celebrating a P5. He shouldn't be celebrating a P5, but he hasn't won in over 2 years. And to the Rahal guys, I mean, Ferrucci's driven 4 races this year and he's finished in the top 10 in all 4. I mean, you may not like him personally, but you cannot deny what a good racer he is. I mean, he is, just to be able to jump in modern day IndyCar, not being in the car every week and be in the top 10 is phenomenal.
And the other thing I did like, it made me feel warm inside, the return of a 26 car starting field. It just seems like, doesn't it?
You wouldn't think 25 to 26 feels that much bigger, but it does. Yeah. It really does. That made for a little bit of shenanigans in qualifying, although not with the back end guys. It was Jack Harvey had a somewhat unfortunate issue where he got loose and stopped and spun in qualifying, and that affected Rossi and Pagano going in and out of the group. But yeah, if Dale Coyne's running 3 cars and Carpenter's got 2, Foyt's got 2, all Rahal's got 3. I mean, it's impressive. Suddenly top 15s are not bad results, and top 10 really means something in that deep a field.
Yeah, especially with Sebastian Bourdais, who looked so strong early on, had some issues and came along 11th. And with he tried some strategy, tried to go off strategy. Road America was looking good for a while, drifted back once again, but it was a baby step for AJ Foyt Racing, getting that 11th place finish, and Scott McLaughlin too for Team Penske. I thought I would see more from him at this point of the year, but looking at how everybody else is doing now, I can't fault him for the results he's had, I'm sure.
Yeah, and he's about where I thought he'd be in the standings. And you look at where he is, he's ahead of most Andretti Autosport guys. Him and Rossi are close. I think Rossi is either just above or just below him. Powers 11th or 12th. I mean, so that 11th to 14th-ish points ballpark, that's good. The thing that I'm actually intrigued on the last 6 races with McLaughlin is Grosjean's supposed to run Gateway, or he's very likely going to run Gateway. So he's actually in the rest of the season now. There might be enough for him to catch for, rookie of the year championship. So that'll be an interesting thing too. And the Nashville car count, from what I've heard, it could be even bigger than 26 from what I've preliminary gathered. There could be one or two extras for that, maybe three.
And who knew IndyCar is gonna be like Formula One with a summer break?
Yeah. Yeah, the Olympics break, it hasn't happened in a while, going back to, my old days, back wearing those shirts in the 2016 season. But actually, on a TV note, and coincidentally, the ratings came out for the Mid-Ohio race, and they said it was, I think, one of their most watched races ever on the channel, which is, timing couldn't be more perfect. They haven't officially announced the next stage of contract negotiations yet, but they're close. In the way, I think the paddock speculation throughout the way this year was supposed to go was, see how May goes. May went really well, and then the races subsequent, particularly with these early start times. I mean, Road America was an early start time. Mid-Ohio was an early start time. You've had, I think, 6 network broadcasts so far this year, and they've all done pretty well. So it's been exciting. It's been exciting to see.
I was kind of frustrated by some of the people that were criticizing NBC with cutting down, putting that Mid-Ohio race in such a tight window, but knowing you had a long race at Road America for the Cup Series. I mean, a tip of the hat to NBC by saying, let's make this thing work. Let's go real tight, cut the pre-race, cut the post-race, make sure everything is in there. But I think it works out for both.
I'll say that's a good template though, because I forget. I think one of the Detroit races had a long pre-race and then a bad. One of the two recently has had a long pre-race and a tight post-race where we didn't get to see the post-race. I would much rather have a much shorter pre-race, get in within the first 5-10 minutes, keep people right off the gate, get you hyped, get going. And then if you get that hour 30, hour 40-minute race in, you can still hit what you need to hit on the back end, and it still doesn't take too much of your day out.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll be talking about this in just a moment. The SRX Series is having these tighter windows, these smaller windows. The days of the 4-hour Pocono races, Dover races, those are a real struggle for the race fan. There's too much going on. Road America had less. Their ratings were down from the previous 4th of July weekend, but there's 2 caveats. There was a pandemic going on too at that time. A lot of people were home. And it was Daytona. I think NASCAR is going to be ecstatic with Road America for the Cup Series. I don't foresee that moving at all. And also, I wanted to touch base. Road America re-upped with IndyCar this year too.
That just got announced this week too. Great to see that, especially because I wasn't sure where they were at in terms of their title sponsorship deal. I mean, I think Kohler was the first 3 years. Rev Group has been for the last 3. So it's good to see that early commitment, because it's clear that there's been a candid, obvious, fan-friendly return. I mean, Road America was such a pivotal part in the 2020 season with the first doubleheader and the first real kind of semblance of fans. It wasn't full, but it was a step in the right direction. So it was weird not being there this year, but when you haven't seen your dad in 18 months, you go out there.
Yeah, you have to do that. Family is first. So I mean, yeah, you have to do that. And there's so many weekends up. I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of stuff going on this year too.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, and plus with IMSA coming up in August, going all the way to the VSCDA Vintage Fall Festival in September. I mean, it's just been, I think, a home run for Road America this year. Although let's move over to the SRX Series, which I'm pleasantly surprised by. How about you?
I would agree with the pleasant surprise thing. I watched the first race at the Connecticut track, and I didn't really know what to think of it just because it was so new. But I mean, I think the obvious highlights, the drone footage has been spectacular. We're not going to be afraid to make adjustments to things. We're actually going to take people's reaction, and the guys are just having fun. There's no pressure. There's not like a championship. There's not a chase. There's not playoffs, any of these, extra perks. It's just, and you're seeing how the fans are reacting in these small venues too. They're giving these small short tracks a major stage. I mean, Slinger this weekend, Slinger is going to be on national television on
That's
Saturday
awesome.
night.
That
I mean,
is,
how
yeah.
cool is that?
There's a great story too with bringing in the local drivers.
Yes.
You know, with Doug Colby in the first week, uh, guys like Cody Swanson, which deserve a national stage. Now,
I was a little frustrated Swanson didn't get an encore against Bobby Santos. Matt
yeah,
Weaver from Auto Week had a really good piece about that a few weeks back. But even like the 17-year-old kid wins the Slinger Nationals.
yeah, Luke Fenhouse, which
Yeah.
is exciting because I mean I think, and I'll be one of them. I thought for sure it'd be Ty Majeski, but Luke, you know, tip of the hat to Luke Fenhouse. This is going to be a pretty neat deal for him to kind of show his stuff on the national stage. I mean, for a young kid like that, you know, a national stage like that and let's face it, the name of the game is getting eyeballs on you and get a sponsor at this
And
point.
when you and just speaking of young kids on a national stage, how about Ernie Francis Jr.? This
Yeah,
is a guy that I remember covering when he was 14 or 15 years old, I think, and driving Mazda 2s in the series formerly known as Pirelli World Challenge and the TCBs, which was just this great, like, when they were on IndyCar weekends, they were such a palate cleanser. But this is a kid that, always had a lot of talent, but running in Trans Am, in its current iteration, you don't really think of young guys coming through the ladder like you used to back in the 80s or 90s. This is now a guy that is not an oval racer, not really a dirt racer, and he's competitive with with Tony Stewart and with, Labonte, Waltrip, Castro Nevis, for goodness sakes, running these things. Yeah, it's just it's surreal to see this blend, and it's true to form, Paul Tracy's still a black hat, and getting the cop intro on
yeah, yeah.
Saturday night. So
It's good shtick, as
it's
they say, right? You know, it really is, and I think that it's so cool with Slinger, with Lucas Oil Race, last week, and with the guys too. It's a good blend. I think there's somebody there for everybody, and you got some personalities, and even let someone like Marco and Andretti, who we've certainly been around for the last 10 years in the IndyCar series. He's kind of opened up, hasn't he
oh,
seems like
completely. Yeah.
yeah, like he's really having fun.
Marco, I think, has always been the most misunderstood driver in the IndyCar paddock, because if you get to know him, he's just really hilarious and just down to earth, really takes care of the guys. But he's had the pressure of carrying that name for the longest time. And because he hadn't had a really good season in, almost 10 years, now he's kind of in this, like, I don't have to do this. And I can pick and choose what I want. I mean, he's done the SRX stuff. He's done Indy 500. He's done an LMP3 race. He said recently, I think he wants to try a NASCAR race at some point, which, seeing guys that are in other disciplines get to try NASCAR and vice versa, I'm loving seeing that, because it's just building audience and crossing it over. So that there's a looseness and a candor that he hasn't expressed publicly in a long time.
Mm-hmm. And let's face it, he's looked pretty good doing it too. I
Yeah.
mean, he's looked far. I think a lot of people exceeded expectations of his performance on the dirt. A lot of those guys did too. And I think those cars, there was some reservation, like, oh, because how the trucks did at Eldora and that, and some of the hardcore dirt track people were, oh, they're slow, they're cumbersome. But I think with this car, at first with some criticism, by just at the looks of it, I think it's worked out pretty well, hasn't it?
I was gonna say no one's judging the car by it looks if it races fun and gets people out of the seats, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
some of the prettiest looking cars were things that might be aesthetically good but don't necessarily race well, i.e. the current IndyCar chassis on short ovals, but that's a different topic for a different day. So but yeah, I mean, it's been, it's allowed people to flourish whether you expected them to or not. And that's what's been, I think, been cool about it.
Well, I'll be up there on Saturday at Slinger. This is our big weekend too at the Milwaukee Mile for the Harry Miller Club.
Very,
We're going to have up to 50 vintage Indy cars at the historic Milwaukee Mile, which just had a late model weekend a couple weeks ago. And so we got the vintage Indy cars this weekend, and then don't forget, late in August we're gonna have the ARCA series at the Milwaukee Mile. So there is racing at the Milwaukee Mile, and then on Saturday We run until about 1 o'clock or so at the mile. Then guys start packing up. I'm getting in the car and running up to Slinger for the SRX Series. I'm looking forward to seeing all the listeners and viewers up there and stop by and say hello.
The Zautke double in full effect on Saturday.
Yes, it is.
I
Yeah.
also want to give just a general shout out to Dave Kallmann, who has been
Yes.
killing it like this year. I mean, I just, going this whole Wisconsin racing scene. Imagine the stuff that they've been able to cover this year. This Cup race, this
Mhm.
Slinger race, in addition to the usual stuff, the Road America thing we just talked about. I mean, it's been so cool to see what he's been able to do from a storytelling standpoint. He did a piece prior to the Cup race that had a whole list of NASCAR drivers that was in the state of Wisconsin history that was just really awesome to read. So I just wanted to.
Somebody had a small part in that.
I was going to say, I think somebody knows somebody knows the back end on that, but
Here's the thing with Dave. He's not restricted by the size of the newspaper. He can put as much as he wants online, and he's been doing that. So I mean, he's been probably pumping out more stories in the last year than he has probably previously, because he's not limited by how many columns they're going to give him next to the Packers, Bucks, and Brewers.
right,
So yeah.
which have all had completely quiet seasons and off seasons, and there's been no local sports coverage at all to discuss here. So,
But yeah, so we got the Packers made it to the championship game. We got the Bucks in the finals, and now we got the Brewers have to step
Brewers just
up in the
had an
World
11
Series.
game win streak, and I think they're in first place, close to the All Star break. So,
Well, and here's the scary thing: it's pitching that wins in the playoffs, and they got damn good pitching,
they have
Tony.
excellent pitching.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to be a Wisconsin sports fan, and with all the racing too. So and the SRX series at Slinger, I'm really looking forward to that. I really am. I'm looking forward to seeing what this kid can do. Luke Fenhouse can do. I'm looking forward to seeing Willie T. Ribbs, who I saw in Indianapolis, and I sat at St. Elmo's with him for a while, and I had to explain to him, no, Slinger is not dirt; it's paved. So
You just had to make sure to say Slinger, make sure to get
he gave himself some shit about that. He said, I know, I said swinger. I'm so embarrassed. He goes, yeah, I know how it's pronounced now. But I was telling him, I said, because he thought it was a half mile. He thought it's like Bristol, right? A half mile. I go, well, it's like Bristol, but it's a quarter mile.
Well, shorter, yes.
Whoa,
Yeah,
he's like, really? I said, yeah. I said, and I was kind of
Chase Elliott too. They announced this week Chase versus Bill Elliott as well. That got announced on Monday or Tuesday. The days have been blurring together this week, 4th of July holiday and whatnot. So,
and myself and Dan Margetta watched the Slinger Nationals with a certain NASCAR Hall of Famer named Bill Elliott about 15 years ago or so. But now I remember watching the Nationals on the rough. Is me, Dan, and Bill.
it's nice.
Cool. That was very so cool. I've been blessed. What can I say? So, Tony, we certainly appreciate you joining us. When are we going to see you next at a racetrack?
Next event for me is I will be at the Road America IMSA race.
Okay.
So that weekend, I have gone back and forth on whether I was going to be at Road America or Nashville IndyCar for like it shifted 3 or 4 different times in like a week for a couple different reasons, depending on things that came up. But yeah, I will be at the IMSA weekend at Road America, which is the August 6th through 8th.
6th through 8th. Yep. All
Yep.
right. I will be up there too. I was going to go to Nashville, and I decided against it. So
Part of me, and actually that's a good note that IndyCar is off now on the summer break until a brand new street course that goes over the water.
that's gonna be wild.
That's going to be wild. The ownership group for that has Justin Marks, the biggest new name in NASCAR, Dale Jr., Scott Borchetta, and Big Machine. Those guys. The event, the buzz seems insane for that. It's a combination of that, Trans Am. I think SRO has a series there. There might be something else, and it's a late start time too. I think it's a 5:30 Eastern start time, so it's a really unusual set of circumstances. And so for the championship and where that series is at, plus just the lottery of first year street races, which we don't get anymore. I mean, I think it's the first new street race since maybe Baltimore would be my guess, just off the top of my head. And that was 10 years ago. So
All right, Tony. Thank you. Appreciate it. And we'll talk to you again. You've been listening to the Traction Reaction Podcast. I'm Steve Zautke, and he's
Tony DiZinno.
We'll see you next time on the Traction Reaction Podcast.